Okay, so this is a quick shout out video to a comment I got earlier in the week on one of my other videos. Just before I get into it though, I've just got back from a very boring session on the static bike at the gym, because where I live in the north of England, it's now cold, dark and grey by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so getting out on the bike is quite difficult, which made me think of my new pal from Colombia, not sure I can say your name right, Unchirian Paris, who says greetings from Colombia, and I wondered what the weather was like over there. Probably a heck of a lot better than it is here. So getting into this, the comment I got was from DG Masand. Any chance of you comparing the Roadmachine 01 with the Defy Advanced Pro 0? And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. So I've done a few videos on the BMCs before, and they have some of the most confusing naming system out there. In the name you've got the 01 and then the 1, or the 2 or the 3. So the 01 refers to the type of carbon the bike's made of, and in this case this is the top of the range ultra light carbon. So the number on the end designates the equipment on the bike. So you've got 1, 2 and 3. Number 1 is Dura-Ace Di2, number 2 is SRAM ETAP, and number 3 is Ultegra Di2. From your comment, I assumed it was this one you wanted to look at, but this is crazy expensive, so I'm guessing the one we're actually going to look at is the 02 one. So the 2 is the next grade of carbon, which is obviously slightly heavier than the 01, and again you get 3 versions, 3 different equipment versions, and that is Ultegra Di2, Ultegra Mechanical and 105. So I think the one we're going to look at is this one, Roadmachine 021, £4,200. Just before I compare this to the Defy, I thought it would be worthwhile just quickly comparing the 2 BMCs. So the top of the range 01 ultra light carbon and the 02 one, super confusing names. So the headline is, are you having a giraffe? The top of the range is £5,700 more expensive. So what is it about this bike that's so more expensive than this bike by £5,700? That's a lot of inflatable giraffes. Well, if we just fade between the two, the 2 standouts immediately, or 3 standouts, is the 01 has got the cables hidden away, which is obviously much more attractive. It also has a set of NV disc wheels. I'm guessing what, they're 50s, as opposed to the DT Swiss 35s, I guess they are. And then obviously we have the Dura-Ace Di2 on the expensive one, and we've got the Ultegra Di2 on the cheaper one. I'm not going to call it the cheap one because it's still crazy expensive. Okay, so that's the standout things that you notice straight away. The Dura-Ace Di2 group set, really difficult to find a price for the whole group set, but I've estimated that list price you're going to be paying about 1,700 quid ish more for the Dura-Ace if you buy it off the peg. The wheels on the 01 are crazy expensive. NV SES 4.5 CAR disc versus the DT Swiss E1800, and that's going to set you back off the peg an amazing extra £2,800 for the MV. So they're about 3.5 grand, and the DT Swiss are about 350 quid. So that's the big one. And then there's a few little things like the tyres, 60 quid more, the saddles like 50 quid more, and of course presumably the bearings and stuff like that will be more expensive. But when you total it all up, off the peg price, you can account for about 4.5 grand. So the rest of it, I guess, is BMC profit. Thank you very much. So there we go. Anyhow, the original comment was, what's the difference between this and the Giant Defy Advanced Pro 0? So the first thing that you notice that's different is the Defy is £299 more expensive than the Roadmachine 021. So just flicking between the two, looking at this, you can see that you're going to be able to get lower down on the BMC. The stack's higher on the Defy. They're both rocking the drop seat stays. And if you read the bump on these bikes, they both talk about, and of course they both have very technical names for each of these things, but they both talk about how when they design the layup of the bike, that because these are aimed towards the comfort end of the road bike range, that each point of the frame has a specific layout to reduce road vibration and noise, so that at the end of the day, after a long ride, you're going to be as comfortable as possible. So they're both Ultegra Di2. The Giant has a cheeky little power meter, whereas the BMC doesn't. Shimano Ultegra with Giant Power Pro double-sided power meter. So that will account for the extra £299 that the Giant costs. That's quite cheap for a power meter. So there we go. But there's quite a big difference there on the positioning of the bottom bracket. We'll have a look at the geometry specs in a minute, but the BMC has shorter chainstays, which puts the bottom bracket in a slightly different place to the Defy, which has a longer chainstay. Obviously the Defy is a more compact frame, as per most of the Giant bikes. Both got very similarly spec'd wheels. Haven't actually checked the specs on the disc rotors, but it looks like the BMC has got bigger rotors there. Same size on the back. So there we go, that's looking at the two bikes lined up there. So if we look at the geometry specs, what I did was, we've got the BMC Roadmachine, we've got the Giant Defy, and then I've put a control in, the Giant TCR. Now if we imagine the Giant TCR, all the measurements are towards the race side of things. What I've then done is compared the specs of each of these two bikes and seen which one is closer to the TCR. Interestingly, when you top these up, they're bang in the middle, 4 each. So not much in it really, but they do have different characteristics. Looking at these numbers, probably positioning wise you can get in a slightly more racy position on the BMC Roadmachine. Handling wise, maybe the Defy is slightly closer to the TCR, so it might feel a bit more snappy. But without riding the bikes, obviously very difficult to tell. So there we go, that was a quick shout out video. If you have any bikes that you want compared, obviously I can't do everybody's, but let me know in the comments down below and I'll do what I can. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel.